To the third man, the beginning of page 145 in the art scroll, Mesilat Yesharim, this one here. And so up until now, he's been discussing the first man and the second man. Now, all three men agree that in Hasidus, the key is how is it going to look in the papers in the morning. I just saw, not recently, but I saw a clip by Warren Buffett who was giving a class, and he said, the key to his business, the most important value in his business is credibility. I mean, that's his business, really. So he said this is what he writes to all his managers. He has 150,000 people working for him, and he sends to all his managers this note: how is this when you're going to go do something? Think about this. If an unfriendly reporter but intelligent was to report about this on the front page of the paper tomorrow, how would it look? And if it doesn't build credibility, don't do it. Oh, Yisraela, welcome. Just to let you know, we're being recorded, not by the FBI now, but online. So all three men understand it's all dependent. A chassid, to be a chassid, is not just about doing the thing in of itself. The next level up is how is this going to come out? And now to the third man. So that we understand with the first two men, it's really an impossible situation. And especially the second example, well, no, actually both examples, it could have gone either way. The destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple. In both ways, the choices they were faced, that they were thought that they saw the choices in front of them, could have gone bad either way. So that's Yechiel's question, like how do we know how it's going to turn out? So now to get to the third man, we're going to go into this. Behold, this is what you have to do. You can't judge an action regarding the Hasidus of it. I can't really translate that. How it is alone. You have to examine it on all the different sides to see and to judge it until you can see the truth. Is it appropriate to do it, or should you avoid it, abandon it? Now, you notice from this that he doesn't say how this is going to turn out. That was the first and second man's, I would say, classic mistake. And that answers Yehiel's question. It's not a question of how it's going to turn out. Yes, that's going to come up, and we're going to see examples of that. But that's not how you figure how it's going to turn out, as we're going to see. He gives an example. The Torah commands, you should surely rebuke your people. Right? You should surely rebuke them. You come upon, but there's many times that a man enters, goes to rebuke someone who's making a mistake, sinning. Or right, and his words won't be heard. Right, but going with him, and what would it cause? Right, the evil will spread even more. Like he's going to get upset. Oh, you don't want me eating treif? I'll show you what treif is like. And he pulls out a high ham sandwich with cheese on top. Right, so he's like, you don't like it when I bake Shabbos? I'm going to show you how to really bake Shabbos. Right. And he adds on to the sin, this mistake. This is not Hasidus. What should he do? He should be quiet. And so the rabbis say, just as a mitzvah to say something that could be heard, so too it's a mitzvah to not say something that won't be heard. I can see you laughing there. I'll mute you. Sorry. I can't unmute you. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not something you typically hear.
It's not something you typically hear. Exactly. Right, follow? Now, here's your $64 million question. What mitzvah is it to not say something that won't be heard? What mitzvah does that? Where's the mitzvah?
I don't know, but it might be like, don't put a stumbling block before somebody, because by saying something to them, you're going to end up like making them dig their heels even more. You're going to like either like incite them even more. And in that way, it's sort of like a stumbling block for them, because had you said nothing, they wouldn't have continued doing something more. But now that you've said something, they're going to do it even more so. So it's almost like a stumbling block, but not quite.
It's not quite a stumbling block, because a stumbling block is the behind the blind. Here I am, I'm pointing out, oh, by the way, do you know that sandwich you're eating is treif? Here I'm pointing out. Right? So I'm clarifying the stumbling block.
Yes, but if you know the person you're speaking to is not going to appreciate the comment, and that they're just going to be even more
right. Could very well be. Right? Could very well be. But what mitzvah is that going to be? Is it I don't
think there is a mitzvah specifically. I don't think there is a mitzvah specifically.
That's exactly the point. So you gonna say something, Yisrael?
I was just gonna say, whether they do it more or not, it was shogeg and now it's mazid, which is worse.
That's a very interesting point. Right? Could be it's amazing, could be even worse. Yes, that's what he's saying. Right? You're saying something could make the whole thing worse. Right? But the question is, the way Chazal phrase it, just as there's a mitzvah to say something should be heard, so it's a mitzvah to not say anything which will not be heard. And which mitzvah is that? There isn't one. Right? It's very difficult to identify the specific mitzvah.
So why does
how about lashon hara?
Well,
it's a mitzvah that if you don't say something that's
you're saying it's lashon hara to say to somebody else.
Oh, I see.
Right. Could be lashon hara. I mean, no. It's a very vague. Whatever it is, it's very vague what mitzvah this would fall under.
What about not embarrassing somebody? Embarrassing people is bad.
Could be. Right, that's the famous story of Tamar and Yehuda. Right, but that's a specific situation. It wasn't that Yehuda wouldn't have listened. She didn't say anything because it would have been embarrassing, because it was in public. But it could be situations like that, right? But it seems to be, in my humble opinion, although I'm not that humble, it seems to me that there isn't a specific mitzvah, right? What mitzvah are they talking about? The mitzvah of the Torah. If you understand what the Torah wants, how you want, it propagates the concept that they also have Noach this question, a very interesting question. As Yisrael said, that if you teach somebody Torah and now they do the Avera unknowingly, it's worse than if they did it and they didn't know, because now it's mazid, it's on purpose. In other words, someone's eating treif, just a simple example, and they don't even know anything about treif. So you come along, you say, you ever heard treif? And you tell them the whole story, right? I go, thank you very much, and kind of carry on eating, right? So now they're mazid. It's far worse what they're doing. So they asked Rav Noach this question. Right, you follow? The answer is not very easy to discern. I've heard the answer. It's very, very difficult to understand it. I don't know if it's very difficult. I don't understand it. He said very simply, right? How can it possibly be that the people that you do get, that do understand, because unfortunately in the Kira business, it's a bit of a numbers game. You teach 100 people, you don't get 100 people, right? I don't know what the numbers are, right? I don't like to speak, but it's not 100 people. So the 10 people that don't become from is worse for them. But what about the 90 that do become from? Okay, so that's better, but you still, what gives you a heter to teach those 10 people, right? So he said it can't possibly be that the Almighty wants us to lead people just to wallow in their shame and to live an awful life. In other words, if you were about to I don't know, eat something that is dangerous, right? Now for sure, right? Eating something that's poisonous is an avera. So if I come and tell you you can't do it, right, because it's poisonous, and then you go do it, right? It's a bigger avera. So I shouldn't tell people, right? That's only in refuah. That's only in the guf, the body. What about the neshama? If we can teach people how to be happy and how to enjoy life and get the most out of life, which is what the Torah is all about. So the point is, remember, all three men agree that Hasidus is all about seeing where this is going to end. So rebuke is one of those places where we can see where this is going to end. The person you're talking to doesn't listen. So you're going to say something to them, you're just going to make it worse. Sometimes those people are people you're married to. Some of those people you gave birth to. Some people, some of those people are, neighbors or whatever, right? We get a sense of like, this is not going to help. In other words, when you get upset, not you personally, but when someone gets upset, right, and they tell the other person off, right, the only reason they're allowed to do that is tahocha, the mitzvah tahocha. But you got to know, you're telling them off because you think this is really going to help, or you're just venting.
It seems to me like you need an extra question there, which is, are they even ready to hear? Because sometimes you have to tell something to somebody that's very important, but if you just wait a week or a few weeks until their emotions have cooled down significantly, or they may have gotten some, fresh perspective, then you can approach them with something that might not be pleasant, but they're more likely to hear you, especially if you're coming from a place of like caring about them.
Right. That's a very good point. So you got to make sure you're doing it at the right time, the right place, in the right atmosphere, in the right words. Exactly. You got to think it through.
Yeah, but you really have to know the person to be able to do that.
Yeah, there's always I always like the example of Abraham. The only place in the whole Torah where anybody gave anybody rebuke is Abraham. Right? Anyone know the story?
The wells with Avimelech. You taught us.
I told you this one.
Well, I think you taught us with line by line, not with Mesilat Yesharim, but.
Oh, okay. So Abraham said to Avimelech, Avimelech comes to Abraham and he wants to make a peace treaty with him, which is a phenomenal thing. So now Abraham's a king and Abraham's is a single individual. So he understands that Avimelech is like, Abraham's a powerful person. He needs to make a treaty with him. See, Abraham uses that opportunity to give Avimelech rebuke. And what is he rebuking for? The wells, right? So imagine for a minute that Abraham and Sarah having dinner that evening. And Abraham says, oh, you never guess who came by today. And Sarah says, I don't know. Who came by? Avimelech. Avimelech? We mean Avimelech the king? Yeah, Avimelech the king. Avimelech the king that tried to rape me? Yeah, Avimelech the king that tried to rape you. That's the one. Yeah, exactly. Oh, why did he come by? Well, he wants to make a treaty with me. Can you believe it? Right? So did you? Well, I did, but I used the opportunity to give him a piece of my mind. I want you to know. I weaned him up, went down, up one side and down the other. He was like, I cut him to pieces. Oh, about time. What exactly did he say? Well, you remember those wells we were having a problems with the police, Tim? No, I don't remember the wells. Yeah, like the way you keep stopping them up and they're giving me a hard time. Oh, okay, I remember something. Well, I told him off about that. Oh, and you didn't mention the bit about raping me? Well, it never came up. Here he is, he's rebuking. The only time in the whole Torah. When do we read that story? Right? When do we read that story? On Rosh Hashanah.
Was Sarah angry?
We don't have no record of. I'm not aware of any record of it. I'm sure she understood the message, which is which is why we read it on Rosh Hashanah. Why did he give a rebuke? Right? You understand? Imagine somebody, right? God forbid, if you have a daughter, you'll understand, who tried to rape your daughter. Right? What kind of punishment would you want to ream out to him?
The slow, torturous kind.
A slow, torturous death, exactly. Now you got it, right, fella? Do you want to help his neshama, fix it, his neshama, to become a better person?
No, slow, torturous death.
Exactly. So why do we read this on Rosh Hashanah? Because, you see, you don't give up on anyone. I always say all the time, right? Who's Bernie Madoff's biggest victim? You know Bernie Madoff.
Bernie
Right?
Madoff.
What's that?
Bernie Madoff is his own biggest victim.
Right, biggest victim, right? So when you appreciate that, then you feel sorry for everybody, all the villains. You feel sorry for them. Right? If you feel sorry for them, you want to help them. So why does he give him rebuke about the wells? Because that's the only place he would hear it. That was the beginning. That's an opening to try and get him to understand what life. That's what he could talk to him about.
So are you saying he wanted to give him tochacha about the rape attempt, but he couldn't because he wouldn't have been able to hear it?
Right. Wouldn't get anywhere. But we read that on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because we don't want the Almighty to give up on us. So don't give up on other people.
Is Laban and Yaakov, is that the same kind of relevance in this issue? Where Yaakov confronts him for all the rotten things he did to him? Did he do that because he felt Laban was now susceptible in some way? Or was he just venting his anger?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
I thought that was more to do with the fact that Lavan was approaching him with like a certain amount of deceit, and he was correcting, what was true and what was false.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so let's move on. Right, it's very simple. It's very appropriate that a person is magdim, pushes to run and runs to a mitzvah and tries to do it in all its details. And he should be engaged in it. But there are times that because of this, it will cause friction. And therefore, it will be more of a bizoyan, of a disgrace to the mitzvah. And it will be a Hillel Hashem. And Kibiyosef Devadai Shechai Chassid, and in that situation, it's not Chassid is obligated to leave the mitzvah and not chase after it. And so we say, the rabbis say, with the matter of the Levium, and this is their language, Mipnei Shayu Yodim, because they all know, Shekol Mi Sheta'em Ba'aron, that anybody who carried the Aron, Skara Muruba, his reward was great. Hayu Manikim Et Shulchan, they would leave the Shulchan, the table, and the menorah, right, and the altars, and Kulam Ratzim, and they would run to the Aron, so they would have schar, they would have reward. And because of this, Hayal Zeh Mariv, they would create a tumult. Va'omer, each one would say, right, I got here first, and this one, and they would argue about it, and the other would say, I got here first, I'm the one, it's my turn. And Matokach, Ayun Nahagim Kaladrosh, and because of this, it created a terrible but laxity of the behavior, and the Shekhinah would punish them. They would suffer. Now, this is very easy to understand when it's something that's important to us. It used to be, now the Jewish people have changed the minhag, but it used to be that only one person was allowed to say Kaddish in shul. And it created a lot of disagreements. That many of the halachas about who can say you reread it don't really apply today, because we let everybody say Kaddish, because it just created too much friction. It's not my turn. You said last week, but I just gave a big donation. All kinds of things would come up, right? And even today, still situations come up. The people get upset because it's it's their loved one, it's the Kaddish, it's like it's very emotional. The emotions are highly charged. Do you see? It's very different. The famous Chafetz Chaim, that when two people have want to lead the services, and they both have for a yortzeit, so he says that it's a bigger aliyas in the shama. You're giving greater reward to the deceased by letting the other person daven than if you push yourself in and daven. Right now, I've said that to a few people, it doesn't go anywhere. Because everyone wants to say, oh, yeah, but I got to be the one to daven. I got to be the one. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but it's when it's something that's important to us and that we treasure and value, it's very difficult to see the greater picture, right? And that's what he's talking about, right? To see where this is going to end up.
So in essence, you're saying that the emotion, you have to take the emotions out of whatever it is you're engaged in order to be able to analyze it properly.
Right, exactly. It's very hard to do when it's something that's real. Right? It's the people that carry the Aron, these are the Levium. There's not small fry here. This is not, whoever. These are really great people, chosen specifically, and it was a very big deal.
Is this the trap that the first and second man fall into? Because they're so focused on the outcome and the result that they allow their emotions to sway them. Because when they're thinking about the outcome and the result, they're thinking in terms of, well, what's it like? How is it going to affect me?
Depends on where this rule came from. If this rule was put into the mainstream of thinking, and now somebody says we're not going to have it this way, you're going to be upset over it. But suppose the only way you ever knew was the way it was, and now it's been changed, and people get upset. They don't want to have the change. But if it weren't changed in the first place, you wouldn't have the fight. Is that right or wrong?
I'm not sure.
Oh,
I'm not sure. I hear what you're saying, Zita, that it's right, the first man and the second man don't, that's why the Levium were getting caught up. Right? Is this how we should be living?
Right, because they're not thinking in terms of what does God want. They're thinking in terms of what they want. They want to be the one carrying it.
Right.
Or they want to be the one cleaning the whatever.
Right, but we're not talking about reward, like, money. We're talking about, like, they sense the real value in this, in what they're doing. You see this a lot in yeshivas, right? A good bacher is learning, but there's a weaker bacher that needs help. And it's challenging to, like, give up your time to help him. It's a challenge, right? And we find the same thing ourselves. There are people that need, maybe in davening or anything, right? I'm going to take away from my davening to help them, right? So, this is what living in a shore is all about. Community is all about. But you get caught up in it. I've got to daven. I've got important things to say to God. Whatever happens to be.
But again, it's not focusing on God. It's focusing on self.
That's exactly right. You're missing the whole point. What's the whole point of Torah mitzvahs? Exactly. Okay. Hinei chayv adam. How the person is obligated. The shmor kol mitzvahs, to keep all the mitzvahs, b'kol dikdotechem, and all their details. Ifnei mishi yeh v'lo yirash v'lo yavash, in front of anybody. And not be afraid, and don't be embarrassed. And so it says in Tehillim, King David said, I will speak about your testimonies, neged malachim, in front of kings, v'lo yavosh, right? I think the Ramchal says this somewhere else, that King David, where everybody else, these kings would come see him, and they would want to talk about their palaces and their boats and all fancy things, and he would talk about, keeping mitzvahs. And they were just like, who is this guy? So we learned, you should be as bold as a leopard, and light as an eagle, run like a deer, strong like a lion. That's not what's on the Bishmaim, right? To do the will of God. What's the will of God? Right? However, but nevertheless, even with this, you have to be discerning. Because this is talking about the Gufa mitzvah. For sure, you have to do the essence of what the mitzvah is. So now you've got to place your face like stone and just do it. But there's other additions to this Chassidus. If a person was to do it, if Nehemon, in front of the masses, they will laugh at him and make ridicule. And we'll find, right, that it will cause them to sin, and because they'll make cheap of Judaism. And they say, you Jews are like, the Jews are nuts, the Frum Jews are nutty. Right? And you'll get punished because of that. And in this case, you should leave off doing these things, for they are not for sure an obligation. In the in this situation, it's more fitting for the chassid to leave it from to do it. And here is what the verse said: "Hatzner lechet im elokecha," walk humbly with God. Become, in other words, don't push yourself in front of people. Don't have to be the big shot. Don't don't go for recognition. Just be, just be, don't have to have your name out there. Become a Hasidim Gedolim, and there are many great Hasidim that left their custom, the things they were accustomed to do in Hasidus when they were amongst the people, because it would look like arrogance, right? The general rule is this: anything that is an ikar mitzvah, anything that's the essential mitzvah, he should do it before everybody, and not be, don't worry about being ridiculed. But what is not the ikar, the essence, the essential part, right? And that will cause people to ridicule you, laugh at you, and ridicule you, you should not do, right? You know, all these ideas, again, this is how the third man thinks. How is this going to turn out? How is this going to look in the papers? Nimsam Lamed. I'll tell you a funny story. I admit my sins here. We were working on this couple and trying to bring them in, teach them, etc., etc. You know, the whole Kira thing. And it was some event, I forget what it was, and she was singing, and she was borderline, she just started to learn and everything, and she was singing, right? She was singing, and I was there with some other people, also students and people like that, Jewish people, and all secular, and so she got up to sing, right? It's called Isha, so I left. Right, so when the appropriate time she can finish singing, I come back in before she gets back to the table. So I said I didn't want to pretend like I was so righteous, right, so I said, great performance, well done. And she says to me, I thought you weren't allowed to listen to women singing. And then what do I say? Thank God they became from the great family, kids and everything, the whole deal. So, it's one of those situations I don't think I could win.
What did you say, Rabbi Bar?
What did I say about after she said you're not supposed to? I just smiled. I had to eat the fact, because if I said I walked out, right, she would say, well, you're lying. And it was in front of everybody, and that I think would be worse. So, and everyone would think, what's wrong? Everyone else at the table, they didn't understand the whole thing with not listening to women speak. And amongst secular Jews, not listening to a woman sing is highly contentious. So I was stuck either way. I didn't know if I did the right thing, the wrong thing. After I shouldn't never have lied in the first. I should never have lied in the first place.
But what if was it possible that you could have said, I've never heard so much applause for a performance? Yeah, you could hear the applause. You could hear the applause in the hallway.
Yeah, and it's in hindsight, yeah, for sure, I could have done it much better. But it's an unusual situation where the singer's kind of getting firm and they're not quite yet, and usually these Kira situations, it's a broken record. You've seen it over and over and over again. You see the same situation. This was a very different kind of situation, which I blew. Okay.
But she became from, so it's good.
Yeah. Despite that, the Imsaz bottom of page 146. Therefore, that's we learn. Somebody who wants to become a chassid, the true chassidus, he has to weigh up all his actions, told us, according to the result, that will come from them. And the and all the details that are dependent upon them, according to the time, according to the people, according to the situation, according to the place. In other words, you've got to take everything into consideration. I can't tell you how many times I argue with people who should know better about marriage. I do a lot of marriage counseling, and they take into consideration, usually one of the spouses, they forget about the children. I go, if you do that, I can't. People won't talk to me anymore. They're like, if you do this, the children are going to get burnt, and you do that, you really got to like examine every situation. The famous story of Rav Shach when he was older. Rav Shach was the God Lador in his time. He got Lador not every time, but he was a phenomenal. And he was older, and Rosh Hashiva came to see him with a few of his rebbeim, and they wanted to kick out one of the boys in the yeshiva. He was very disruptive, and they're doing all these terrible things. And they before they could throw him out, they had to go. They felt they should ask the God Lador, Rav Shach, what they should do. So they sit down and tell him all the things he's doing, smoking, blah blah, all kinds of different crazy things. And so Rav Shach said, what does the father do for a living? And they look at each other and go, I don't know. They said, is the mother, is there enough food at home? What's the refrigerator like? I don't know. And the siblings, okay. None of the questions. He got up from his chair, which is very difficult, and he shouted at them, said, Rotzkin, murderers. He threw them out the house. Right? You don't know what this is what the Ramchal saying. You're going to weigh every situation. Right? Maybe the father, is out of work and there's terrible shalom bayis, and if he got a job, it would help. And the kid doesn't want to go home, and he isn't sleeping at night. And blah, blah, all kinds of different scenarios that could be that you don't know. Before you go make these kind of decisions that affects people's lives, you have to know the whole situation. Right? And that's what he's talking about. So whether if he should separate in Hafisha Tali, you're taking if not doing it will engender more Shem Shemaim, Kiddush Shem Shemaim, right? V'nachas ruah, and give and pleasantness to God, right? Than actually doing it. In that case, he should separate from it and not do it, right? But it seems you have this particular thing. It seems good, but the result, right? And the result will be bad, right? And another action, right, appears bad, but the result is good. Okay, he says everything goes according to the end and the result. Because it is the fruit of the action in truth. The end of the and this idea is not, you can't give it over. This is a fantastic idea, he says now. To somebody who understands, who has the correct thinking. Because it's impossible to explain the details. There's no end to them. But Hashem yiten chachma repeat das tfuna. The Almighty will give chachma. So what I think the greatest example is one that we recently experienced is shutting down the shores during COVID. Right? I personally, and I've spoken to Rebbeim about this, big Rebbeim, I think it was a terrible mistake. The results of which are going to be felt for a long, long time. Because here you are, you're teaching people that shul is not important. Right? There were people that kept the shuls open, and there were Gedolim who said you should not close the yeshivas. I mean, closing shuls, right? Rabbi Breidowitz talked about this, when during the cholera epidemic, Rabbi Kiva Eger kept the shuls open. Here all year round, we're telling everybody, you've got to show shul is important. It's the Shekhinah rests in the shul, and we it's a life source for a Jew, and we're closing them down. We don't close down hospitals. Don't close down hospitals because that's life and death. Well, shul's not life and death. That's how we. Right? If the God forbid, the shuls are closed down forever, that'd be the end of the Jewish people, and now it's Chutzlawitz. Gone. Yeshiva's closed down. Oh, that's it. We're finished. Right? It was crazy. You just can't do such a thing. So why did they? Because you argue with anybody, there was no specific mitzvah. Here you got Pekuach Nefesh on the one side, and what's the reason for keeping it up, keeping them open? There isn't.
Against the law. Were you supposed to violate the public law in order to keep the synagogues open?
Well, in America, it's an easier issue than it was in other countries. Because in America, they sued the government and said, you can't do such a thing. You have free assembly. You can't, the Constitution protects and they won in certain states that did prosecute. Right? In other countries, it's more of a complicated thing, and that might factor into it. But nevertheless, in principle, this is the concept of stake. My brother-in-law told me there was a guy in London who threw himself off a bridge, couldn't take it anymore. And I'm sure there are lots of other cases like this of people they fell apart. I know one person who was falling apart. He said, I don't see anybody. My shore was my life. And, a big problem. But even without that, the impact it had on the message, on our value of what a shul is, has completely changed. Not for the good.
I think, if I may, that in the United States, I don't know what country, if everyone is from the United States here, but there's a separation between church and state, and we have the right to assemble. We have the right to practice our religion as we see fit, and it's unconstitutional for those executive orders. That is not the law. It was an executive order. And if it's a shas hadchak, I think it's called a smad, I'm sorry, where the religion's under attack. So there's Yarov Val Yavor for 3 cardinal sins, right? For murder, idolatry, and adultery.
That doesn't apply here, because that's only if they're attacking it because it's Jewish. Here, they're not attacking it because it's Jewish. All places of gathering were outlawed. There's only
but you could have riots in the street if you were BLM. So some show very intelligent.
Right, but it wasn't an attack on Judaism. That's what the halacha regarding shmad means. But it is a serious thing that you're closing down the shuls, right? That's a big deal.
I know people who never closed their shuls.
Yeah, I know stories of that too. I think it's a big mistake. But anyway, you see, we're in the Mesilat Yesharim here. So you say, why did it happen? Because people are thinking, what's the mitzvah? Right? You couldn't present a mitzvah on the other side. It didn't register. Now, he gives one final example, which is a fantastic example. A Maaseh, which epitomizes this whole concept. A Maaseh to Rabbi Tarfon. And this is the story of Rabbi Tarfon. You'll hear, we'll point this out. He was machmir and went according to Beis Shammai, and he nearly died. He got into a lot of trouble. Bandits came, and when he told the Rabbanim, they said to him, Kedai would be fitting, right? That you went through this, because you transgressed the words of Beis Hillel, even though you were being more machmir. Right? There was a question about whether you daven standing up or sitting down, and it's a whole long thing. The Gemara goes into it. But he was machmir, like Beis Shammai, and bandits saw him, and he nearly died. So they said to him, you suffered because of this, because you were being machmir. So what about being machmir, right? According to preachers, we've learned before, is one of the preachers means to go by the more machmir opinion. And because this whole thing was the machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, who inyan kavod Yisrael is a very important idea. Why? Because it was a great machlokas, a great argument that happened between them. But in the end, it was decided that the halakha follows Beis Hillel forever. Hine kiyama shel Torah, and it is the established Torah. Shekamah din zeh yeshab kol tovik ad l'lamumim, and it's going to be an extant forever and ever. We're following Beis Hillel. That's it. We're done. V'lo yachlish b'shum panim. You can't alter it for any reason. Shalot say Torah because otherwise the Torah would be, God forbid, 2 Torahs. But Alken das a Mishnah sod, and the Mishnah points this out. Yoter Chasidus, the greater Chasidus, it would be greater Chasidus to follow Beis Hillel, even though it's more lenient than following the more stringent opinion from turning the page, like Beis Shammai. And this should bear example for us. To do what is right in the eyes of Hashem, right? So again, right, which mitzvah is it to not have 2 Torahs?
What did you say? What did you say again?
Which mitzvah is it to not have 2 Torahs?
2
There is
talis?
no mitzvah.
There's no mitzvah to not have 2 Torahs. Right? There's a famous story of Moshe Isserles, who was known as the Ramah, and there's Moshe Isserles. Let me with the Ramah. I forget his name now. Sorry. And he was writing a Shulchan Aruch at the same time as Rav Yosef Karo. Right? This is a little bit before the internet, so they weren't emailing each other, right? So Rav Yosef Karo came out with his Shulchan Aruch first, and Rav Moshe Isserles closed his book and put it on the shelf. Right now, later it became the addendum to the Shulchan Aruch. But he didn't want to have 2 Torahs. And he said this idea, just as it's God's will that I write it, it's God's will that I should put it back on the shelf. And the Kedusha that brought enabled his writing into the Shulchan Aruch, the addendums in the Shulchan Aruch, established the Shulchan Aruch as the mainstay for all Jewish life everywhere in the world. We all follow the Shulchan Aruch. It's the book, right? So this is the idea that he's trying to say. What does the Almighty want? He doesn't want 2 Torahs. Where is it written in the Torah you can't have 2 Torahs? It isn't, right? And that's what he says. These ideas only can be propagated and followed by somebody. This is why we go to Gedolim. This is why we go to the Gadol Hador, because you need tremendous insight and thinking and brilliance and genius and understanding and thoughtfulness, and that can see all the sides to everything. That's this idea. That's yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It almost sounds like you're also saying that in addition to like making the decision after analyzing and thinking in terms of what Hashem wants, that you have to do that on a continuous basis, because if the Ramah, was writing the Shulchan Aruch, then he was thinking, well, this is what God wants me to do. I mean, I'm sure he analyzed it from every single corner before he started. So, he must have had to also continuously like keep analyzing and make sure this is still what God wants. So that when he found out that that Rav Karo was doing it, at that point he's like, okay, this is no longer what God wants. So is that how you're supposed to live too? Like
That's right.
Reevaluating all the decisions?
That's right. It's, what we call that in day-to-day language?
Oh, the cheshbon hanefesh.
Well, that's true too. Right? We call it a mother.
Why do we call it mother?
That's what mothers do. Fathers also, right? That's what you do. Is this, am I being counterproductive? And believe me, I've met many a mother who picks on their kids and drives them crazy and is completely counterproductive. We call this counterproductive. That's the concept. So I'll tell you a story. I was, when I was in Israel, I had a Rebbe, I shouldn't mention his name. So he told me the story of when he was a child. He was a child genius, and he found out years later. But his mother was at the teacher conference, parent teacher conference, and the teacher said, "Your son's a child genius, but he doesn't really work very hard. He could really do much better if he worked hard, but he gets a straight A." So the mother said, right? The mother said, "The next exam, give him a B." Right? So she gave him a B, and he was crushed. He told me I was crushed. I didn't know my mother did. I found out years later what had happened. But I worked all year like crazy to get an A. That's Hasidus. Right? That's what the Ramchal's talking about. You've got to know the kid. So I'm teaching this class years ago and about parenting. And I used this story. And a woman in the front row, she raises her hand. She says, "That story never happened." And I've been teaching a while by then, and I never heard anyone ever say something like that. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. But in one of those situations, you go, "What's the script on this?" It's like the same thing as the singer. So I said, "Can you explain?" I don't know what to say. She says, "Yeah, I have a daughter, also a child prodigy, total genius, and I don't know where she's going to go." And I thought, I'm in trouble now because it undermined the whole class. And she's got a story that proves that I was wrong. And it's like, oh, I'm done. So she said, the Almighty gave me the Chachma at that moment to understand what to say, as you'll see. So she tells a whole story about her daughter's child genius. She goes to parent-child conference, and the teacher says to her, "I want you to know at the exam I gave your daughter a B. She really deserves an A, but she really doesn't work hard enough. And I gave her a B, and she should really work harder." Right? For the same story. So the kid got a B and felt it was undeserved. She got all the answers right, and the system was rigged and not fair, and she never worked another day in her life. And she's been like a problem child ever since. I've had nothing but sores from this kid. That's what the mother said. Right? So what did I say?
I don't believe it.
No. So I said, no, you heard the story wrong. You see, in my story, the mother gave the child a B.
Oh.
In your story, the teacher gave a B. And I went out on the limb here, and I said to her, "I bet you knew it was a mistake when the teacher said it." She said, "You're right, I did, but it was too late." Right? The teacher overstepped her boundary. Right, Paul?
Because
You see,
the teacher doesn't know the kid like the mother does.
you see, that's what the Ramchal is saying. Right? You're going to know what you're doing. You can't just tell people get divorced. You can't tell people get married. You can't tell people anything. You got to know what you're doing when you give people advice. Right? And that's the whole transgender thing that's going on now. They're telling these kids what to do. It's not just transgender. It's the whole psychology of children that's out of whack. Right? They're telling kids how to live and everything. And they don't care. They don't track them. They don't follow up. When the kid falls off the deep end, they don't feel bad. They don't even find out. It's on to the next patient. Right? That is it. That's what you've got to do. You've got to see where this falls out. Right? And make sure it's going to work out. You're on the hook. Right? That's what the Ramchal is trying to tell us. That's the third man. That's how we should be living. How is this going to turn out?
Rabbi, couple of things. One is about that last thing you just were talking about. My mother was obsessed with my grades when I was little, when I was in elementary school. And I was just smart enough that I could get all B's without putting any effort into it. But one year, I decided, okay, I'm going to please my mother. I'm going to work my butt off. And so I did. I worked really, really hard. And that was back when I was little. You got like 22 grades. You got grades for, I don't even know how they did that, but I know there was like 22 of them. And I made straight A's, except since I was a fat little uncoordinated kid, I made a B in physical education, which at the time for me was pretty darn good. But anyway, my mother looked at my report card and then she just kind of tossed it aside and she said, "You made a B." And that was it. I was done. I never did it again. It was just like, fine. You know, that's it. It's over. I'm never doing that again. And I never did. I mean, that was it. It was over. And it's the other thing, and you're not going to approve of this, so we'll start out with that. But during COVID, you were talking about synagogues closing and all that stuff. Well, the conservative synagogues decided that they were going to run their services online, which I know why that's not a thing. But I will also tell you that it really helped me get through COVID. You know, I couldn't go to shul because all the shuls were closed, and I wasn't seeing anybody and all that other stuff. The fact that I could at least
but that proves my point.
Yeah.
You needed it. You can't just stay. People needed that social interaction.
So much.
Yeah.
Needed to go to, it really, I don't even know that I'd still be Jewish now if they hadn't done that. I mean,
Right.
it really was it was an uplifting thing.